You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 4th. Today is National Cinnamon Bun Day, World Animal Day, National Vodka Day, National Golf Lovers Day, and of course, it's Talk About It Tuesday, so it is naturally National Taco Day. Thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. We're live every Monday through Friday on YouTube and audio only on Clubhouse. And if you are joining us on Clubhouse, you can participate in the show by raising your hand if you have a brief comment on the story most recently presented. But without further ado, let's pay a quick bill so we can get right back to the news.
At True Classic OG, we live by one motto: stay true. We stay true to our legacy cut of True OG that's always fresh, piney, gassy, and delicious. We represent the spirit, hustle, and diversity of our great city of Angels. And we stay true to the spirit of this plant, doing everything in-house to ensure that you get the highest quality and consistency with every batch. And that's what's made us LA's favorite OG. True Classic OG. Stay true, Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Starting off the day today, we're going to start it off with, that's right, the man, the myth, the legend. He's a cannabis wizard doing his damnedest to continue the work of the Merry Pranksters and the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, alongside the Hogwarts PhD and Tripping Balls and the co-host of What's Good, the Cannabis Flower and Hash Review Show, and host of Radio Free Earth podcast that boasts over 33 years in the game in sales, genetics, and cultivation. Starting us off today is none other than the Matthew St. Germain.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, all. My story today comes from Leafly, and it's that a study ties legal cannabis to lower obesity rates. This is great. I love all these studies that are showing that stoners aren't actually fat, lazy, and stupid. A new study showed cannabis use could be connected to lower obesity rates in states that legalize adult use. North Dakota State University researchers tracked obesity rates in Washington state from 2002 to 2018. They compared those rates to controls in a synthetic state, which means a kind of an amalgam of several states that aren't legal. The stigma-shifting results were published in Cloudy with a Chance of Munchies, assessing the impact of recreational marijuana legalization on obesity, by Raymond J. March, Vishan Rayamaji, and Glenn L. Furton via the Journal of Health Economics. The study authors wrote, our primary experiment revealed recreational marijuana legalization, which allowed for recreational marijuana dispensaries to open, resulted in decreases in obesity rates for Washington state when compared to the control state. The authors concluded, as more states gravitate to decriminalization, expanded medicinal use, and legalized recreational use of marijuana, our findings provide important insights into contemporary drug policy. Another study from 2016 found cannabis users in Sweden had a slightly reduced risk of type 2 diabetes than those who don't consume. With legalization spreading, researchers nationwide are poking at long-held theories about how cannabis truly impacts users. The FDA announced this week that it would expand its research on the plant, and new reports have even linked use of cannabis to greater rates of physical activity and motivation. This is Matthew St. Germain for High at 9 News. And I would just add, when I smoke weed, it definitely makes me want to do yoga or get out and go for a walk in nature. And I'm just really glad to see that a lot of these long-held untruths and stereotypes are falling away as more people learn about the plant.
I'd have to agree with you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'd have to agree with you, Matthew. I love that. I love that. It shows us not as just lazy stoners. I mean, we always know that
Yep.
we we are the control group, but I'm grateful to know that that this research is coming out. It's beautiful.
It turns out if you smoke weed and you're lazy, that you're just lazy.
I think that the data like this is important to, be able to share with people. But I also want to always kind of, I devil's advocate on this a little bit in the way of when I do a lot of different cannabis things, I don't do much. I chill out on a lot of cannabis things, not all, but a lot. Like if I take more than, 5 milligrams of edibles, I like the dosing makes sense. You know what I mean? Everyone that's like, oh, low doses, those are baby doses. I'm like, no, I smoke a lot of freaking weed. And I think the problem has always been that people didn't really understand where people are like, oh, a brownie is going to comatose you, right? It's going to just put you down. And it's like, well, we didn't really understand dosing. So yeah, you were probably eating 160 milligrams when you ate that fucking brownie. That wasn't a good play. Yes, you're going to sleep for like 3 days, and now you can take a normal dose and a small amount and be fine. And so I think a lot of that too is, people that were originally willing to even participate in like any sort of like acknowledgement of I smoke weed are the ones that were likely eating whole brownies. You know what I mean? So like now we're evolving as an industry. So I would go so far as to say that large amounts of weed will make anybody fucking lazy. Like almost anybody, I don't care who you are, like 99.9% of people will be lazy if they take, too much edibles. No, not 99, 94% of people, because 6% of people don't have the P450 enzyme, which will metabolize edibles and actually get you real high. Because I feel like a lot of edibles, I mean, who can eat edibles all day and not get high?
What about the P90X?
Shut up. Who on the stage can eats more than 20 milligrams when they take an edible?
Well, hold on. First of all,
I do.
Matthew,
I don't take
I'm
edibles.
saying regularly.
I don't take edibles because
Why
edibles are a waste of time. I'd rather smoke weed.
Okay.
For the first time, I'm going to have to agree with Jason on this.
Yeah.
I'm more of a flower girl. Edibles just don't do it for me.
And I don't high, or do they get you super high, or do you feel not like you don't understand what's happening? Because I feel like a lot of people don't realize the difference between the metabolic rate and the different types of edible ingestion, right? So if you're taking a nanoparticulate versus a butter base, and I think that's something else that people are missing as well is like the variable.
The sugar based ones are the best because those ones don't metabolize; they just go straight to the vein.
I mean, I think the takeaway from this article is just to have common sense. Like, I literally know someone that got sent to the hospital for drinking too much water. So it's like,
wait, what?
Like no joke,
Hey, no joke. I was listening to the radio one time when they had a contest to win a Nintendo 64, and it was about drinking water. And the girl drank so much water she actually died because she consumed too much water too fast.
So it's just common sense. It's knowing your body. It's like knowing your limits. It's just, and I'm glad things like this are coming out. But I don't want us to get. On some level, I think this headline almost undermines the cannabis industry. Like it's sort of a joke. Like it's like, okay, great. Like cannabis lowers obesity. Does that mean we're all pro cannabis now? Like,
I don't think it says it lowers obesity. I think it's saying that it doesn't add to obesity, right? I think that was.
I thought it was just saying that cannabis consumers make healthier choices.
Yeah,
I mean,
there it is.
We're not. That's what the headline literally says. Study ties legal cannabis to lower obesity rates.
Well, headlines are not always correct. They're used to bring people into a story. I think what undermines the industry more is cloudy with a chance of munchies. We need to get away from the stupid puns and bullshit like that.
Yeah, that's why I didn't read out that part of the tagline. I also left off the end line where it was, now we know how Snoop keeps his slim figure.
Well, that's what it said?
Yeah. So ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think that's what we need to be pushing back against. And I don't mind a kind of story like this because this will get media attention. And I think it helps people to see that there's another side to this plant, and maybe make them look at it for another perspective other than just getting high, that it can help with obesity and such. So
there's 1,000 million ways, and or 1,000 different ways that we can consume it, is the reason why I'm making that conversation. You know what I mean? Like a small capsule or like a slow release tablet or a topical or a dab, like you consider like the variable of how far on the spectrum those different products are and how it's going to make you feel. So the idea of like cannabis makes you lazy is like a brownie in 1977 made everyone lazy.
Yeah, and maybe the real headline is like, I have too much anxiety, depression, or pain to get up and go do things. But when I consume cannabis, those things are alleviated so that I can go live a more active lifestyle.
So are you saying, Robbie, that cannabis is a crutch for those people?
Shut the fuck up, Jason.
Look.
Speaking of crutches, I think that's a great segue for fucking Jason Beck. Jason Beck is the industry's crutch, for that matter. Cannabis's oldest retailer, our very own Kaiser Brose. What do you have for us today, Jason Beck?
Oh, yeah. Today, my story is all about corruption and professional bad decision makers, because I'm very aware of how to identify those, because I know so many of them. And this one is nonetheless, because I cannot believe that I'm reading this as a headline, but a cannabis bribe and arson, former Adelanto councilman sentenced to federal prison. A former Adelanto city councilman convicted of taking a $10,000 bribe to help open a cannabis business and also hiring someone to burn down his restaurant for an insurance payout has been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Jermaine White, a 46-year-old Riverside resident, was sentenced on Monday by U.S. District Court Judge Jesus G. Bernal, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office at the Central District of California. Wright was found guilty on June 22nd after a 6-day trial of bribery and attempted arson, prosecutors said. Investigators began looking into possible corruption in the San Bernardino County city earlier in 2017, according to the prosecutors. In June of that year, a confidential informant introduced Wright to an undercover FBI agent who went by the name of Steve at Wright's restaurant Fat Boys Grill in Adelanto, according to a pre-sentencing report filed by the prosecutor September 19th. Among other things, during that meeting, Steve told defendant that Steve was interested in moving his marijuana cultivation business to Adelanto, the report stated. Steve also asked about the best way to get permits, licenses, and other approvals necessary for operation, and told the defendant that he was interested in purchasing a commercial property outside of the approved zone for marijuana cultivation at a reduced price, and then attempted to have the land rezoned by the city council. Wright, who was Adelanto's acting mayor and pro tem at the time, soon named his price to arrange the deal, telling the undercover agent he would help clear the way for his cannabis operation for, guess what? A whopping $20,000. Dun, dun, dun. Conversations continued between the two men for several weeks, according to the pre-sentencing report. Wright was recorded in August telling the confidential informant that he was in contact with marijuana businesses that would pay them $20,000 for engineering a vote to select the business as one of the 4 to receive a marijuana dispensary permit in the city, according to the report. The councilman told the informant the money had to go to a nonprofit set up to conceal their scheme, and that he would put the informant on the nonprofit's board so they could receive the money as well, the report stated. Wright eventually agreed to taking a $10,000 bribe and told the informant that going forward he expected a stack or $2,000 at any time he had to infringe to head off any code enforcement at the business, according to the report. That month also saw Wright hatch his arson scheme. The informant put the councilman in touch with a different undercover agent posing as an electrician, according to the report. The councilman met with the agent in early October and laid out his plan. Wright said he wanted the damage at his restaurant to be total, in quotation marks, according to the report. He told the undercover agent that the building's landlord would be turning off the water on an upcoming weekend, leaving the sprinkler system useless, the report stated. Defendant said that his insurance policy provided $300,000 in coverage, according to the report, and the undercover agent said the cost of the arson would be up to $1,500. Defendant explained that the fire would have to burn quickly because the fire department was just down the street from the restaurant, and the fire department would probably arrive within 5 minutes of the fire starting. The defendant added that he can leave a gas line open and turn off the alarms, making it look like staff made a mistake. The two met 3 days later, and Wright paid the undercover agent $1,500 after the agent told the councilman he needed more time to prepare for the job, prosecutors said. In mid-October, the FBI executed a search warrant at Fat Boy's Grill and interviewed Wright, who confessed to hiring the undercover agent to burn down the restaurant, prosecutors said. The following day, the informant told the FBI that Wright had been in contact about the search and asked for help to make the undercover agent go away. David Corey Dallas, Wright's attorney, told the Times that he and his client were pleased the judge went with their request for a 5-year sentence, the minimum allowance by the statute. We're also pleased that he rejected the U.S. probation and pretrial services requested a fine, Keola said. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, this just totally sounds like you're in cannabis, but I just don't understand why anyone would risk their freedom and go to the federal prison for just a measly $20,000. But who am I?
I mean, this happens in every industry. I don't think it's unique to cannabis. I think Martha Stewart did insider trading for what, like $30,000 or $40,000.
No, Martha Stewart did way more insider trading. That wasn't for like $20,000 or $30,000. It was for way more than that.
That's what they actually got her for. The actual like trade that they got her on was a $20,000 or like a $30,000 come up. It was like one specific trade that they can like pinpoint that she did. Yeah, no, it was
There's
not
bullshit. I'm going after Martha, but don't get me started. What about
no, Martha didn't snitch though. Martha's cool.
Yeah, Martha is solid. I would
forgive me, but are we surprised? Like, you had me at Adelanto.
Right.
I have clients out there, and when I'm driving out there, I'll tell people on the phone, I'm like, I'm on my way to hell, and they're like, oh, Adelanto, and I'm like, yeah, bro, like it's okay. So for those of you who are tuning in that are not familiar with the city of Adelanto, it was basically a fucking dust bowl up until about 5 years ago when the cannabis industry started developing like whole blocks of property out there, and there's a few different properties that are just like entire industrial parks of nothing but indoor grow facilities. Now, let me tell you another thing about Adelanto. It's in the middle of the fucking desert, and it gets like 110 degrees in the summertime. So they're growing weed in the desert inside of buildings that are literally having to fucking battle the heat and the elements.
It also snows out there too. Don't forget that. It snows too.
Just to give you some perspective, like I was never more happier when I saw the Panda Express out there for lunch.
So my God. Yeah, you're like, yes.
The food options are slim. I was there for burning trees, and I'm plant-based, so I was at the grocery store. I was looking for farmers markets. Like,
you're not going to find nothing out there. You got to be part of the brown lunch bag gang out there.
And so cannabis has really come into Adelanto because it was not a developed city by any means. You know, it was, one thing that has happened. The Boring Company is based out there. They have a facility out there now. But besides that, it's a few houses and like some sketchy fucking properties with like the most amount of like RV like beat down, like fucking
it
somebody
looks
got
like
murdered in there. Like,
you know what it looks like? You know what the best show I think we could ever film in Adelanto would be like America's Best Meth Labs. America's Best Meth Labs. That would be the show that you would film out there.
Where I'm from.
And like, I'm sorry if you're from Adelanto and this isn't your life, but you probably also agree that that's a lot of the things out there. And so cannabis came in, just started building these giant blocks, like blocks and blocks and blocks of fucking buildings. And so this guy was the mayor at the time, the council at the time. And so, I mean, I'm sure that this is not the last story that we're going to hear about Adelanto
No, but we have been following this story for a long time, and it is interesting to finally see the closure and sentencing of this crime.
Yeah.
What's the population of Adelanto?
Probably like 20,000.
Not a lot. They all work for weed companies. That's all there is out there.
Small town. You know it is.
I'm saying 20,000.
Have a grocery store.
Oh, I was close. 34,000.
It's right next. It's right next to Victorville, which I commonly call Victimville.
Right.
Yeah, it's the place that Gretchen, if somebody's like, hey, you want to come to California? I've got a place in Adelanto. don't go there. Be like, we're going to go to LA and then we're going to take 1 day trip out there, and you leave fucking super early and you get back before the sun's down. Okay. You promise me that.
In all fairness, you could live.
I can't have you be a casualty of the cannabis world in Atalanta taking you.
You could also live in Las Vegas and have the same drive from LA. It's like the middle point.
Yeah, you could live in Vegas. Vegas is 2 hours from it's dead center between LA and Vegas.
Yeah.
So have you ever driven? Has any?
Yeah, that's when I went to Burning Trees. We drove.
Yeah, so
from Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah, no good.
All right. That was a fascinating story. But coming up next, she calls herself a lady in the streets, but a freak in the spreadsheets. An ag and efficiency expert and self-described general data bitch. Coming next to the stage is none other than the Nicole West.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I am just super excited for this week. I'm going to be heading out to Hall of Flowers. So I'm sorry if the next couple of days are a little patchy for me on my internet, my last day of good Wi-Fi. So today, my headline's coming out of the Marijuana Moment by Kyle Yeager. And my headline is The Bipartisan Bill Targeting Illicit Marijuana Grows and the Use of Banned Pesticides Filed in Congress. A bipartisan pair of congressmen filed a new bill aimed at eradicating the use of dangerous, unauthorized pesticides in illicit marijuana grows in illegal and non-legal states. Representative Scott Peters and Doug LaMalfa are sponsoring and targeting the Offsetting Existing Illegal Contaminants Act, or TOXIC, TOXIC. The legislation is similar in intent to a prior measure that LaMalfa and other lawmakers have introduced. The ongoing problems caused by illicit cultivations in California have caused headlines and prompted bipartisan calls for further action to reform and mitigate the environmental damages of unregulated grows. The TOXIC Act is a two-tiered attempt to address this issue. It would provide $250 million in funding for the U.S. Forest Services to remediate areas where banned pesticides have been used as a part of unsanctioned cannabis cultivation, and other increased criminal penalties for people who have used these prohibited chemicals. Under this proposal, the banned pesticides for illegal marijuana grows would be treated the same way as smuggling those pesticides, the maximum penalties of up to $250,000 in fines and up to 20 years in prison. The nonpartisan U.S. Sentencing Commission, or the USCC, would be mandated to review and update sentencing guidelines accordingly. Our wildlife habitat, public health, pay the biggest price for the actions of illegal cannabis grows, who often work with drug cartels, Peter says to a press release. These extremely dangerous and illegal pesticides can harm endangered species like Pacific fishers and spotted owls, as well as Forest Service agents and consumers who can severely be sickened by these toxins. The TOXIC Act will direct federal governments to use the available resources to fix the harm caused by banned pesticides smuggling across the southern border and increase penalties for those use on federal lands. Peters, who's also sponsoring a separate bipartisan bill to promote cannabis research, said. From his part, LaMalfa has been an especially vociferous advocate against, I guess I've never used that word, against illicit marijuana cultivation in California, going so far as to film videos last year that showed him teaming up with local law enforcement to bulldoze such illicit sites. Congressional lawmakers have also sought the fund remediation efforts related to illegal marijuana grows in appropriations and defense legislation. Just last week, Senator Alex Padilla and Dianne Feinstein proposed a defense bill amending the call for federal, state, and tribal local collaboration to address remediation of lands damaged by illicit cannabis cultivations. Illegal marijuana grows have been brought by dangerous cartels into our rural towns, terrorizing residents and decontaminating our landscape. LaMalfa said the banned pesticides that they have used on their products steep into the soil and watershed, poisoning wildlife and endangering the residents who inadvertently consume it. The $6 million in state funding, which will be derived from marijuana taxes and the revenue that the state has generated, must go to the government agencies, California nonprofits, or Native American tribes, who would then work with the growers on remediation efforts. This one pager that's attached to the headline, I hope you guys actually read it. It was kind of interesting about the banned bill, remediate the environmental damage of the banned pesticides. And the main focus is to ensure that the people who engage and trespass in cannabis cultivation using banned pesticides receive the punishment that's befitting to the environmental damage that they cause. Because as it stands right now, they're really not actually being held to that much account based on some of these pesticides. I do a lot of pesticide training, and I feel like the there's a few cities that are really serious about it. And one thing I have noticed is that it's just starting to become a very conscious effort in the cannabis industry as a whole. So, while we are looking at the pesticides that are being used in these, BLM lands and where people are growing off the grid and obviously contaminating watershed in a very real matter, I think that there's something to be said about the facilities that are currently trying to use things that are not being managed correctly as well. So making sure that both the regulated and unregulated market are using pesticides correctly, I think is very important. But with that said, the ability to hold people accountable for destroying the environment with this shit's really important. And when you look at the actual states and what states are allowed to use things and what states are not, it gets really convoluted. So if you are using a pesticide in an area, in any state for that matter, you should probably look up the state's regulations in regards to that pesticide. So I'm Nicole West, reporting for High at 9 News.
Oh boy, more pesticides and herbicides and fungicides.
Well, one of the things that we have to consider too is the native land, that they're having a big conversation about it because a lot of this is their land that's being contaminated.
But Doug LaMaffa is a classic cannabis prohibitionist, and to hear that he is he's doing this is not necessarily surprising, but I'm willing to bet that this regulation is not about protecting the environment. It's about harming cannabis because it has Doug LaMaffa's name written all over it.
Well, Jason, I would say, number one, Republicans love their national parks. They're, they love going out and shooting a bear and such. And then number two, this is just another way for him to backdoor in that cannabis is fucked up, to show all the different illegal grows that they're going to have to remediate and fix. And this will just be like, I'm trying to fix the problem, but it just is a backdoor way for him to introduce that cannabis is a disaster, especially.
But it is a problem though. And that's something
I believe you.
I'm saying it as somebody who's in the industry, who supports, the legacy market. Like, it is a problem. This is not, there's a few things that I will say, like, this is not a huge exaggeration that people are using chemicals that are just going, off the grid, throwing it right into the fucking ground, growing thousands of plants and fucking up waters and bees and bugs and like all kinds of important shit.
I'm more of a sun-grown, all-natural, use ladybugs for
weed
my
smoker.
pesticides. Yeah, exactly. And I would prefer my flower to not have pesticides and chemicals on it. And so I'm grateful that this law is being passed, but I agree. I think that the guy who is a prohibitionist, if his name is written all over it, are you saying
Congressman
that
LaMaffa.
Is he quoted in the article?
Yeah, it's his.
He's a sponsor.
Oh, it's
his bill.
Yeah, it's his bill. It's his bill. He's a prohibitionist. I met with him
that's
tons
why
of times having cannabis conversations. He's never going to change on the issue. It just is what it is.
Well, there are other examples of this in Congress. There was Congressman Harris out in Maryland who is a big prohibitionist, but he sponsored a bill because he wanted it to prove that cannabis was terrible. It was a research bill, and he's like, this will show him the proof that cannabis is the devil weed. And it's like, all right, we'll take what it takes to get you to sponsor something. Thanks. But
here's the thing, though, is that the idea that the cartel is not here, of not just like the cartel, but like different gang organizations growing weed off the grid in California. If anybody thinks that's not happening, you're fucking sadly mistaken. And to somebody who's trying to be a part of like the legitimization of this industry, like, I hate to fucking side with somebody like this, but like, we have to get aggressive about it because the fact that they're doing that, it's making us all look bad. Like, that has to stop. Like,
not to mention, it's also contributing to the lower cost per pound on a wholesale level.
Yeah.
How about that?
Get rid of them. It'll make the price go up. Like, come on. Like,
what do you have to say about that, Matthew St. Germain, being up there in the wooded areas?
Well, number one, if you're paying attention to your discipline and you're on your plants, you don't need any type of harmful pesticides. You can do everything naturally. Plant vigor is really how you resist insects and other vector intrusions. All of these pesticides are for people who want to make money, don't care about smoking cannabis, and are trying to run grows from a distance.
Big facts.
Yeah.
Big facts.
Oh boy.
And if you need help, just call me up. I'll show you how to grow your weed without any fucking chemicals. One of the things I really like, I'm a true outlaw for life, but one of the things I really liked about the legal market was conversations I had with friends that sometimes ended up with us not talking for weeks because of their use of Avid or Balatine, also called Eagle 20.
Eagle 20, bro, has amazing terps. Okay, by the way,
Eagle 20 gives you.
You just went mute. You just went mute,
out.
Michael. You just went mute.
Oh.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you became a mute.
No.
I put my stupid arm on my
there
mouse.
We go.
Yeah,
That'll
just saying.
do it.
I had so many of these arguments with folks, and one of the coolest things I saw about legalization was the increased testing showed that you can grow cannabis to a super high level without any of these carcinogenic or immune harming chemicals.
Can I tell you about there's a little bit of hypocrisy involved in this article at the same time too, because the reality of it is that we do not put our food at the same scrutiny as our cannabis. That everyone consumes food, but only a small population consume cannabis. The whole population consumes food.
Bro, that's not true. That's not true when it comes to
the whole population doesn't consume food.
Your second part about that is true. That part's true. But the way of the only thing that we do differently is how much we test it. The regulations in regard to the pesticides we're allowed to use, we're under the same exact regulations. You have to follow the fucking EPA label. What does the label tell you to do? That's the only thing you're allowed to use it for in that state. Does that state allow that specific chemical? It's fucking black and white. Cannabis is treated like a fucking strawberry on an agricultural level when it comes to what pesticides you're allowed to use. The problem is how much we test it. It is not in what we are or are not allowed to use. That is not true, Jason Beck.
Well,
and it's all the illegal grows that are using the chemicals because they don't have to get it tested.
Exactly.
I don't know.
But it's the testing that's the pain in the ass.
I'm pretty sure there's plenty of legal grows that are doing the same thing too. But
100%.
Who am I to say about any of that? It doesn't matter. Welcome to Los Ashes, the headiest city in America. Los Ashes is a 10-pound smokable city curated and created by the world-renowned roller Weavers. In the past, Weavers has amazed cannabis lovers with his roll jobs, such as the smokable 5-pound rocket launcher and the 10-pound Darth Vader. But now Weavers is rolling an entire city. Have your business featured in Los Ashes with a ton of different sponsorship opportunities available. Contact Weavers at smokablecity.com for more information.
Thoughts and opinions and general shade thrown on the High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers, not those of any other speaker or its followers. The statements made do not constitute legal or accounting advice, and our speakers make no representation regarding the legal status of any substance in any country, territory, area, or its authorities. The views expressed in this room do not establish fiduciary relationships. Our sponsors do not imply, constitute any endorsement by us, the expression of any opinion whatsoever of any part of any speaker or anyone on stage. If you're an easily offended person, this show is probably not for you. Also, fuck off.
Flying into LAX and you want to taste some of the best weed in the world? Then stop by LAX CC, the closest dispensary to LAX. Located at 8332 Lincoln Boulevard and open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Always make LAX CC your first stop when you touch down in LA and score like a winner. And don't forget to tell them I sent you and mention you'd like to get High at 9 for 10% off your full order. Matthew, your mic is muted, my friend.
There we go. That brings to the stage the feisty, red-headed conservative founder of Panoptic Strategies, a Washington insider with Mayflower roots that never backs down from a verbal challenge by pot-loving libs from across the aisle. Miss Gretchen Gailey.
Good afternoon. My headline is coming from Marijuana Moment. Most Americans don't think marijuana is dangerous despite prohibitionist arguments, poll finds. Most Americans don't think marijuana is dangerous despite efforts by legalization opponents to cast the plant in a negative light, according to a new poll. Rasmussen Reports surveyed 1,000 Americans to learn about their views about drug misuse in the U.S., the perceived dangerousness of cannabis, and the idea that marijuana is a gateway to more dangerous drugs. While 59% of respondents said that drug misuse is, in general, getting worse in the country, compared to just 9% who said the health issue is improving, a majority of Americans also said that marijuana is either not very dangerous or not dangerous at all. In contrast, 23% said that cannabis is somewhat dangerous and 12% said it is very dangerous. A majority of Democrats, 60%, don't consider marijuana dangerous, while Republicans are divided, with 48% saying it is at least somewhat dangerous and 45% saying it isn't. Even among those who said that drug misuse is getting worse in the country, 56% suggested that they don't consider cannabis to be a part of the problem, as they also don't think of the plant as dangerous. Interestingly, however, Americans are evenly split on the notion that marijuana is a gateway drug. 46% of respondents said it is either very likely or somewhat likely that cannabis consumption leads to the use of more dangerous drugs, compared to 46% who said it's not very likely or not likely at all. The poll involved interviews with 1,000 American adults from September 14th to 15th, with a margin of error of give or take 3 percentage points. Public perceptions about the dangerousness of marijuana have been steadily declining, especially amid the state-level legalization movement. A combination of factors could help explain that, including the fact that about half of American adults have at least tried cannabis, and broader media coverage of the therapeutic benefits of marijuana. More Americans now openly admit that they smoke marijuana or eat cannabis-infused edibles, that they say they've smoked cigarettes in the past week, according to recently released data from Gallup. And more than twice as many Americans think that marijuana has a positive impact on its consumers and society at large than say the same amount about alcohol. That's generally consistent with the results of a separate poll released in March that found more Americans think it'd be good if people switched to cannabis and drank less alcohol, compared to those who think the substance substitution would be bad. Meanwhile, although perceptions of the dangerousness of marijuana have been declining, fears about the translating into increased underage use have not come to fruition, despite the anti-legalization arguments from prohibitionists. Even as more states move to legalize cannabis, youth marijuana usage rates have either remained stable or declined, multiple studies and surveys have found. One of the most recent federally funded surveys on the topic stressed that youth marijuana use decreased significantly in 2021, as did teen consumption of illicit substances overall. The 2020 federally funded Monitoring the Future survey found that the cannabis consumption among adolescents did not significantly change in any of the 3 grades for the lifetime use, past 12-month use, past 30 days use, and daily use from 2019 to 2020. This, like Matthew's headline earlier, I think is a good thing, and I think semi-related for folks to look at what is going on in this country and how cannabis is not the devil that people make it out to be. The number that's concerning to me in this poll is their question about a gateway drug. I think that is the next major stigma that we in the industry need to work on when it comes to trying to convince regulators and other folks that cannabis is not the gateway drug that it has been made out to be. Because clearly the American public is also concerned about that, but they're also seeing that cannabis, some are saying, is a good thing in their communities, and we need to keep pushing that message. This is Gretchen for High at Night News.
Yeah, the more people I find in especially in conservative states, what I notice is the more people have a personal story where one of their relatives is helped in a medicinal way by cannabis, then the stigma falls away. And this is something I've kind of noticed in the conservative versus liberal dichotomy, is that liberals tend to, for whatever reason, seem to be able to empathize a little bit more. And what conservatives really seem to require is a first-person story about someone they know being either helped or harmed by something to really understand factors outside of their own personal life. And that's not in any way I'm trying to diss. I'm just saying that that's what I've been seeing, is a lot of people I know who were deathly against cannabis, then had somebody in their family suffer from cancer or epilepsy, and were radically helped by cannabis when pharmaceuticals wouldn't help, and all of a sudden they flipped over and they joined our side.
I agree with you, Matt. I've noticed the same thing. And these are just random conversations with Uber drivers, and you can kind of get an idea of where their stance is. But a lot more people are, unless they know somebody directly, then they usually don't tend to come over to our side. If they have more conservative,
Nicole,
focus.
I have a question about this. How do you know if your Uber drivers are conservative or not?
Based on conversations, right? So they'll bring it up, because they'll talk about, well, at least with Trump we were getting money, and they'll say some shit like that, right?
That money train, girl. Oh yeah, don't worry, it's coming back 2024.
And then they'll say some slick shit like, yeah, if you're not a citizen of this country, you shouldn't be here. Slick shit like that, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
Robbie, were you going to say something?
Going down in Vegas.
Robbie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think one way to sort of mitigate, this whole notion of cannabis being a gateway drug is if it's just economics, right? If you can make it easier for people to purchase compliant cannabis and you incentivize them, meaning that it's, you know, economical and it's cost effective for both the consumer and the producer, then you're not buying weed from a dealer that's probably dealing 8 other illicit drugs, and you're not in his apartment picking up a dime bag and maybe something else he's offering you, you know, and I think that's one factor here in terms of cannabis being viewed as a gateway drug.
Well, and I think, and I know I probably won't be popular for this opinion.
Oh boy, here we go. I can't wait.
I think the way the industry has pushed adult use so much is the wrong direction. I think that the way we should be getting cannabis legalized is medicinally. I mean, if you look at the reasons that people use it, they're using it for medicinal purposes, even if they don't realize it themselves.
Yeah,
I mean,
you are right, Gretchen. You are right about that, Gretchen. And the medical side tugs at the heartstrings the most.
Right.
But the reality is that Americans need to understand is that all use is medical use because of all the different benefits and values that you actually get just from consuming cannabis on a regular basis.
The first thing I want to say is they calling it the wrong thing, recreational, right? That's
it is 100%. That's a terrible branding, terrible wording, terrible. Whoever came up with that should get drugged out to the street and shot.
And then the second thing is there are no states that went adult use first. It's always be medical and then adult use. So the drive for the problem is that medical gets left behind once adult use comes in.
Yep.
And then
that's because the dollars start talking, girl.
About the patients, I know, which is a shame, but that's what happens.
I hear you. But when it comes to advocacy for laws, everyone is pushing for full-blown legalization. They're pushing for full-blown deschedule or bust. They're not looking at it from the medical side. They're not.
Somebody get that fucking soundbite. No, but
you know what I'm saying? If you push
this whole notion of
medical bill first, you'd have a much better shot of getting that.
The whole notion of medical is a farce, though. I mean, come on. It's not like doctors were treating and administering quote unquote patients. Like you would just go get a rec because your back hurt. And I know some states it's a little bit more stringent, but like this whole quote unquote medical, I don't even think ever existed.
It 100% existed, bro. It 100% existed, Robbie. Because hold on.
Go to places like Israel. That's where medical cannabis exists.
That's a real medical program. I can't disagree with that.
So are you saying that it's real medical in Canada because they have a federal approved program?
The way that they're handling it is medical, and then
they do more research.
When we actually look at this is as close to like something that would be like the herbal industry as possible. We are medicating, right? We are they're not even giving us a fucking prescription. They're giving us a recommendation. I think I 100% agree with the focus of it. Being on medical gets the idea, but when we're actually making the movement happen, it was the adult use movement that started getting places to just start popping off and be like weed. But I think that we've missed one thing, that is conservative media actually jumping in behind cannabis, like the Sanjay Gupta fucking thing that ended up like
that was CNN. Like, that was liberal media,
not conservative media whatsoever.
Yeah.
Sorry, more conservative media than like cannabis media in the way of like what they're actually putting.
Media.
They're all conservative because none of them cover Iran.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robbie.
Yes.
Oh,
that's a
true mother.
Let's say that again.
Say that again. For the people
or
in
Africa or anything happening in Africa.
Yeah. No, but in the way of mainstream media, you're right. I mean mainstream media covering it in a way that is doing that for a specific group of people, a story or two, like the Charlotte's Web. These things have actually made such amazing impacts on the community. And I think that's what we're trying to do here too, right? Is like show people that it's not exactly what
the major impacts you're seeing are from medical cannabis. And for you to say that
everyone's using it
popping off, I don't know where you're coming up with that, looking at the numbers of medical states versus recreational.
In the way of money coming in as investors. I'm talking about investors became interested of the adult use market. So it started growing drastically faster because adult use existed. Because adult use is making more money than medical, more people will give us more money. So we will be able to expedite research and things like that as well. But it is becoming an after fact, like Nicole's saying, like people are not thinking about it anymore. But if it wasn't for adult use regulations, we would not have the capital in the United States that we have right now flowing through those fucking grows.
Well, and again, I have to disagree. The numbers come down to it, the adult use market is not hugely, vastly larger than the medical.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it
it
is.
is.
The state of California
Yes,
is
yes, 100%, Gretchen, yeah.
93% to 7.
Yes,
93% to 7.
it's ridiculous. The reality
also
of it is
when
that a
it comes to,
majority of the
like-
medical market moved to the
Okay,
adult use market because they didn't have to go and get a recommendation anymore.
Yeah.
They could just walk into a store and it was more
Everyone's using it
convenient.
medicinally, and I
Yeah.
agree with you for that reason. That's why I say it's like it should belong. It's like vitamins to me.
It's a
That's where-
nutraceutical. It's a
nutraceutical
type of thing.
It's a wellness product
Yes.
to me.
Absolutely.
It's not a wellness product for real patients that I've spoken to. They don't consider this a vitamin they take. This is stuff that's saving their lives.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think it's ridiculous to call this is a wellness product.
Certain vitamin
Hey, everyone, we gotta move.
Lives.
I do drugs for fun.
That was an amazing.
I do drugs for fun.
Thank you.
Fun.
Thank you very much, Matthew. That was amazing conversation, everyone. Thank you so much for bringing up that story. And coming up next, Gretchen, she's a plant-based medicine advocate, also the founder of Purple Plant Magic, natural brand ambassador for Black Buddha Cannabis, and the Encyclopedia on Power 88 in Las Vegas, Nevada, every Wednesday morning. It is none other than the Nicole Buffon.
Oh, thank you so much, Jason, for that introduction. Good morning and good afternoon out there on the East Coast. My story today is from Marijuana Moment. Our good friend Kyle Yeager. Nevada marijuana sales totaled $965 million in 2022 fiscal year. Marijuana sales totaled, that since we're talking about how much adult use market is bringing in, marijuana sales totaled just under $1 billion in Nevada in the 2022 fiscal year, generating more than $152 million in cannabis tax revenue. Officials reported on Friday. Most of the proceeds are going toward funding schools. Combined medical cannabis and adult use marijuana purchases totaled $965 million from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. According to the state Cannabis Compliance Board, that's about $38 million or 4% less than Nevada took in during the prior fiscal year, so in 2021. But it's notably higher than the total marijuana sales for the 2020 fiscal year, which amounted to just $685 million. That was the year that Sisalak voted that dispensaries were essential in Nevada, as during COVID. The bulk of the marijuana purchases, 754 million of them, came from Clark County. That's where Las Vegas is located. And another 126 million of cannabis was sold in Washoe County, which is where Reno is. The other 83 million remainder came from other counties. And most of those other counties are just farmland. Several states saw declining sales totals during the latest fiscal year, which could be due to a range of factors such as lower cannabis prices and people having less disposable income compared to the 2021-2022 period. Tax revenue from the 10% excise tax on recreational or adult use cannabis sales in Nevada, as well as a chunk of wholesale excise tax dollars from the medical and adult use market, along with civil penalties, which are really high here in Nevada. There are people that have gotten, even for self-reporting, $50,000 fine, is earmarked for supporting public education funding as prescribed under a bill that Governor Sisolak previously signed. That translates into about $147 million in education funding from marijuana sales for the 2022 fiscal year, after accounting for operational costs. Meanwhile, Nevada is expecting to see a boost in sales now that regulators have approved rules for the first adult use consumption lounges in the state, as authorized under legislation that Sisolak signed last year. Officials are hopeful that the new business category will drive more sales and attract marijuana tourism. The governor talked about the economic potential of the cannabis lounge law in a 420 op-ed for Marijuana Moment this year, writing that the idea isn't new, but no one is doing it like we are in Nevada. We shall see. Sisolak has committed to promoting equity and justice in the state's marijuana law. In 2020, for example, he pardoned more than 15,000 people who were convicted for low-level cannabis possession. That action was made possible under a resolution the governor introduced that was unanimously approved by the state's Board of Pardons Commissioners. Now, the problem with this statement is that I know that there are steps that the people who did get that pardon have to take. It wasn't automatic. It wasn't immediate. And so there's an issue that we're still fighting, and for MM with that issue in Nevada, because those pardons did not come easily. And most of those people have not gone through finished that process. Meanwhile, a Nevada judge ruled last month that the Board of Pharmacy's classification of the drug as a Schedule I substance violates the state's constitution. This was huge. I know we read this story, and this sets such a great precedent for other states. The ACLU of Nevada filed a lawsuit earlier this year alleging that despite voter-approved legalization, police have continued to make marijuana-related arrests because the Board of Pharmacy has refused to remove cannabis from its controlled substance list. That has effectively created a legal loophole that the civil rights group says conflicts with longstanding constitutional protections for medical marijuana patients. Clark County District Court Judge Joe Hardy ruled last month that the board's designation does not, in fact, violate the state constitution, though he's still reserving judgment on whether the governmental body has regulatory authority over marijuana until both sides submit draft orders for him to review on that matter. Separately, in August 2021, a former Las Vegas police officer who sued after facing termination for testing positive for marijuana scored a significant procedural victory, with a district judge denying the department's request for summary judgment and agreeing that state statute protects employees' lawful use of cannabis outside of work. So a lot of things are happening in Nevada with these new consumption lounge licenses coming in and social equity being defined for the first time in legislation. Everybody's watching Nevada. And so we shall see how this all plays out. So this is Nicole Buffon reporting for High at 9 News. I'd love to hear what you think about this story.
I mean,
$1 billion.
Almost, not quite. Almost. They're a few million short of a B. All right. But nonetheless, I mean, I expect to see great revenues there. I mean, Nevada is a 24-hour city. There's many dispensaries there that are 24 hours a day. I mean, so labor costs are lower than in California as far as for labor. So, I mean, there's no reason that they shouldn't be turning these types of numbers.
Yeah, and I think they're finally starting to grow better weed. It took a while before I was able to go into a dispensary in Nevada and buy anything that I was like, I have friends that own dispensaries out there, and I feel like just such an asshole where I'm just like, really, this is what you guys are smoking? Like, bro, like this is Vegas. Like it is a sin to grow this. Like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Like, this is the sin city that they're talking about. But like,
worse than outdoor weed.
Bro, it was bad.
It's bad.
But just recently, I've started to see some quality fucking weed show up in Nevada, which like, ding. That's going to be a win, because I think people that go to Vegas want a fucking high-end experience, right?
That's right.
They don't want some bullshit ass experience with some boof ass weed. Like,
that's right.
Especially when California is right there. Like,
that's right.
In order for Nevada to show up, they need to have quality.
And that was something that we brought up in a CCB meeting roundtable discussion recently that we were invited to. And one of my Chamber of Cannabis colleagues, shout out to the Chamber, we lobbied to get the consumption lounge bill passed, was that there are when we went adult use initially 4 or 5 years ago, there were only one state, California, that was also adult use. And now all of the states around us, except Utah, are adult use. And so that brings competition from other states. They don't have to come to Vegas to get the good stuff. And if you're in New Mexico or Arizona, not anymore. And so we have to consider that, and we have to grow the best. We have to produce the best experience for people when they come here, in order for them to keep coming back. And so that's when, shout out to GLP. I've talked about them before. Green Life Productions, they grow organic flower here, and they are top shelf in every dispensary you go into. They make their no pesticides, no all ladybugs and worms. It's amazing what they're doing. They're making their own compost. And so they did file a petition with the CCB recently because they're coming down at them, trying to find them for their grow practices. And so we're standing up for who's growing the best flower here in Nevada. So when you come, you got to try GLP. Shout out.
Oh man, I can't right. We'll all be out there for MJBizCon, and
I'll see you then, guys.
We will be coming for it. So Nicole, we hope that you will give us a tour once we get there.
Absolutely.
Of where to get the best weed, because Jason Beck only smokes the best weed.
Well, I'm gonna have to see. I'm gonna have to see if it's acceptable for me to smoke first.
We'll see.
Yes,
we'll see.
We shall see.
That's a great segue to Robbie. Robbie loves Vegas. I do know that, and I am excited to see you at MJBizCon, Robbie. Robbie Pinamanini is the cannabis investor, business developer, and licensing attorney who spends his days calling the shot on what's next as the corporate development head at the machine that is ease, and his nights recovering from the mentally exhausting days of regulatory gymnastics as a lawyer and trusted advisor. Robbie, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Hi9 correspondents. Today's headline is California cannabis companies default highlights debt woes facing states' MJ businesses. And what observers say is a sign that California's struggling legal cannabis industry is slouching towards a long-predicted extinction event. A Southern California brand in the middle of ambitious expansion plans was recently sued by its landlord after falling behind on millions of dollars in lease payments. In July, privately held King's Garden, headquartered in Palm Springs and a holder of cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution licenses, defaulted $2.3 million in rent and fees owed to Innovative Industrial Properties, the San Diego-based REIT. That's a major player in cannabis. Regulatory filings cited. A subsequent lawsuit filed by IAP, which leases more than 8.5 million square feet of commercial real estate to some of the nation's biggest cannabis companies against King's Garden, was settled out of court on September 11th, quote, to the mutual satisfaction of both parties, unquote, according to more recent filings. Reached via phone on September 21st, both King's Garden CEO Michael King and IAP CEO Paul Smithers declined to comment, citing the confidential nature of the settlement. Many legal market operators have claimed over the past year to be falling further and further into debt as costs rise, prices plummet, and stalled federal and state reform, taxes high, and the illicit market competitive. Last winter, coalitions of large producers and small craft growers, declaring themselves to be on the brink of failure, unsuccessfully lobbied California Governor Gavin Newsom to cut the state's 15% excise tax and relax licensing fees and other burdens. Some even threatened to withhold taxes if their demands weren't met. The governor eventually agreed to cut the state's regressive cultivation tax, but he also changed where on the supply chain the state collects excise tax, a move that advocates say merely moves the bin elsewhere down the line at a time of historically low wholesale prices. Applicants and our permit holders, they're like, I'm broker than I've ever been because of the economic situation in the market. The situation is so bearish that Chicago-based Choice Consolidation Corp., a special purpose acquisition company managed by former Cresco Labs executive Joe Caltabiano, decided to fold and return investors' money rather than try to acquire a company. The value of major California cultivator Glass House Brands has dropped nearly 80% since it went public via SPAC transaction in July 2021. King's Garden is just another once high company run into predictable trouble, the said. The problem with cannabis is that if you scaled your business, you scaled your debt, said Jared Kylo, the owner of the Los Angeles area marijuana retailer, The Higher Path, and president of the United Cannabis Business Association. Kyle has also repeatedly sounded the alarm over the past years that the legal industry is in serious trouble, only to be greeted by what he says are the deaf ears of lawmakers and regulators. I wish I told you so meant something to them. I really do, he added, but this is what we're going through. This is where the metrics are. It sounds like King's Garden had too many employees, too much overhead, and then the price of cannabis dropped 50% overnight, basically, said Ken Seligson, a cannabis business attorney with clients in California and New York, who's also co-founder of Padre Moo, an Oakland-based delivery service and distributor. So King's Garden is just really, it's another sort of example what's really going on in this industry. The cost of capital is high. People are taking on usurious debt. They're defaulting. And it's really sad to see. And I think the industry is in dire straits, and it'll be interesting to see how things evolve over the next year or two, particularly when the equity markets have dried up and the debt markets are just usurious.
King's Garden's weed is unsmokable.
Dude, okay, and then all on top of that, did you guys see when their product first came out? Their jar was this like fucking insane jar. It was like
they do have a big ass jar.
It had a big ass jar, gold top with an eye on it. And
that's their quarter ounce jar. It's their quarter ounce jar.
No, the original 8s were like that too. Their original shit was like, it was, the packaging must have been for an 8th at least a few dollars, and like they just went so big so quick, and they're like fucking just like. I mean, spending money like they're at the strip club on stuff. And it was garbage weed in this jar that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And so it was like, wow, that's a really fast way to get people to fucking hate you, you know? Like,
I think what this article shows is that unfortunately the MSOs are just at this point waiting it out. They really have the money to be able to wait through these periods of, overtaxing, over regulating, over fees. And, I just, it's so sad to me because I do not want my only option to be Curaleaf weed. No offense to anybody out there 5 years from now. Like I want to be,
I'd stop
I
smoking
want to
weed.
be,
I would quit.
yeah, I want my craft cannabis. I want to be able to go straight to these growers that have been doing it for decades, that care about the plant and care about the people that are consuming the plant. That's the flower I want to buy, not what I can get into in these big MSO dispensaries.
I think that will always exist at about the same percentage as craft alcohol does, and it'll have about the same turnover rate.
I hope
and it'll have about the same turnover rate as well when we look at craft alcohol, right?
I don't know
how quickly they're being like absolved into big business and or just disintegrating. But I think you're going to see a similar existence to like craft beer and alcohol at about, and this is, about 85% consumerism, right? And 15% where people actually give a shit. Same thing exists in food. You know what I mean? 85% of people eat garbage food. About 15% of California, specifically California, I'm not talking about the country. Most of the country eats garbage food. California has about 15% of like markets in some of these cities that are actually providing quality food.
I agree with you, Nicole. If there is an actual free market for cannabis and you're not still dealing with limited
deschedule or bust, right?
And things like that.
Open up interstate trade because California is the
that's the only way that's going to happen.
100%.
Right.
You're right. You're totally right. We need to deschedule it. We need to have interstate and we need to be able to provide it in a free market 100%. I think that's a great way for us to end our show today, right at 10 a.m. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. Thank you guys for getting high at 9 with us Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big shout out to the audience and supporters, to the haters for still talking about us. Huge thank you to True Classic, Weavers, and LAXCC for keeping the lights on. And thank you to our correspondents for being absolutely amazing. Thank you to Cannabis for giving us a reason to do this. And 3 is 4 and everyone on the back end helping us keep things together and create a space in this cannabis miniverse. Thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us.
Have a good day, y'all.
Bye.
Oh, yeah.
You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.